Good morning, everybody. This is Bruce Toski. Today is January 1st, 2022. I came across a book about a famous baseball player, Tommy John, and I mentioned to my father, Bob Toski, who's 95 right now, and he told me that he was familiar with Tommy, had met him, and so today I'm going to ask my dad to relate a story about Tommy John and baseball. Go ahead, Dad.
Well, Bruce, I appreciate you asking me to talk about the famous Tommy John's surgery, which he had from baseball by throwing his arm out overhanded. But before I do that, I want to give credit to this autographed baseball by Jim Kott, who I've known and taught for many years, and he autographed this baseball for me a number of years ago before he got elected into the Hall of Fame. And on it he said, "Bob, a great teacher and friend, Jim Kott." So I have a great autograph baseball to talk about with Tommy John surgery, as opposed to a golf ball. Well, that happens to be Bob Toski on it, which I didn't recognize until I looked at it. And this baseball weighs
5 ounces.
how much does it weigh, Bruce? No, just talk.
Baseball's 5 ounces.
This weighs 5 ounces,
5
and
ounces.
this weighs 1.62 ounces. And what's the circumference of this ball?
About 9 inches.
About 9. And this is 5, right?
Right.
Now, which is heavier?
Baseball.
Okay. So when you throw a ball overhanded, and some pitchers threw the ball sidearm, but most of the pitchers are throwing the ball overhanded. And when you throw a ball overhanded, at a rate of speed of probably 100 miles an hour, the extension, you have retention and then extension. And your weight must keep moving to support motion. If the weight stops and the extension of the arm gets greater and faster, you can tear that shoulder, and that's what's called Tommy John's surgery. I met Tommy John's back when I lived in Miami, and he loved golf. And through our associating golf, he told me about the surgery that he had in baseball. So I'm not sure what year that was, but anyway, if you threw a ball underhanded with a golf ball or overhanded, it's not as likely to throw your arm out, because when I hold a golf ball in my hand, I got it on my fingers, I can throw it off my fingers. But if I hold it in, now I hope to have a finger and palm grip, and I have to put my entire hand around that baseball and then release it off my hand, which is much more difficult than this. So I think this golf ball is made out of rubber.
Partly.
And this baseball is made out of
Leather and
leather. The core, I don't know if the core is the same as the golf ball, but the relationship is how fast a golf club strikes a golf ball, which is 130 miles an hour, as opposed to a baseball, which they throw about, once you throw it 100 miles an hour. That's really accelerating an extension. And the timing of that is so important to keep moving off your right side. If you stay back and then throw, it's easy to throw your arm out. And of course, a lot of pitchers have done that. And I remember when I was playing golf, a guy named Jim Flick told me to stay behind the ball as I struck it. And I tried to stay behind it and didn't get my weight forward. And all of a sudden I was having trouble with my lower
back.
And I remember taking some shots from the Miami coach that taught football to reduce the inflammation. And so what I'm trying to do is make an analysis between golf and baseball. And of course, when a baseball is thrown, you're trying to have a bat strike a moving object. Let's reverse that now, and this ball is being struck by an implement called a golf club, and you can see the difference in how small they are. And the golf club is now having to strike the ball at the base of your feet. It's not, the strike zone is not like in baseball between what, your knees and your
Hips, waist.
well, somewhere between your knees, and I'm not sure the exact. But the point is, the difference is, one is swinging a bat to try to hit a moving object, and this is a golf club to hit a stationary object. And this is what's so hard about golf, because what's the hardest pitch to hit in baseball? The one that's below your knees. It's then like swinging a golf club. And when you strike a baseball, Tommy John said, once you throw and keep the ball down below their knee line, they hit ground ball. Once the ball gets up by their chest or that's their home run position. So here we are trying to hit home runs with a golf ball at the base of our feet, as opposed to a baseball that's being swung by a 32-ounce, 33-ounce bat versus a driver that only weighs 13, 14 ounces. So that's an interesting relationship, Bruce. And your father's made a study of that because I get involved in the mechanics or the movements and the speed of what happens when you play a certain sport with a certain object. So I was fortunate to be able to play this sport and accelerate a golf club over 100 miles an hour, where when I pitched baseball in high school, how fast do you think I threw this baseball?
70,
Hmm?
70, 60 mile an hour.
40 miles an hour was the fastest I threw this ball.
Wow.
And if I didn't have a lot of junk, if I didn't have a lot of different pitches, if I threw a fastball, there'd be more home runs you can count on. But what your father learned was how to play golf with a club called golf club versus a baseball bat hitting a baseball. So to close, I'd like to just say this. My congratulations to Jim Flick, and I met a great friend, Tommy Johns, when I met him in Miami, and we talked about golf and how he had this surgery, which is now called the Tommy John surgery. So, Bruce, thank you for the interview. I've enjoyed it, and I hope you liked it.
Thank you. Was there anything during your time with Tommy Johns, any specific stories that you wanted to relate that he told you?
Only that he loved golf, and I talked to him about, I use a relationship with this and that, which he found interesting. And if I can just elaborate a little bit more, I taught all the greatest athletes, you name them, baseball, football, basketball, soccer, hockey, I can go on and on. And every one of these great athletes said that it was harder to play golf than it was to play baseball.
Did you actually give Tommy John a lesson?
Yes,
And
I gave him lessons.
how good a player was Tommy John?
Hmm?
How good a player was Tommy?
All pitchers were pretty good players. They had great hand-eye coordination, and they were all low handicap players.
Mhm.
And that's because when you release the ball off your hands, you've got to have sensitivity from your fingers into your palm, into your wrist, into your arm and shoulder. When you throw a baseball, you gotta have a bigger grip on the ball, and it's heavier to throw, so it puts more stress on your wrist, forearm, lower forearms, upper forearms, and then your shoulder. And the faster you throw it, the more effort it takes, which can cause you to strain these muscles and pull and tear them. So that's how that happens. And when Jim Flick told me to stay behind the ball, which he meant to stay on that side longer, that's how when I did, and all the stress was on my hip joint, and all of a sudden I could hardly move. And it was because I didn't get my weight over my left side because I was thinking of staying behind the ball. Well, in golf, your head does stay where? Behind the ball, but your weight, the lower body must move forward to support motion from your upper body. So this is a little more difficult, and now I like to relate to Ted Williams, who I taught and played baseball with. And he said baseball was harder than golf. And I said, Ted, I'd love to debate this with you. And I said, how many strikes do you get in baseball? He said 3. I said, how many strikes do you get in golf? 1. Do you play your fall balls? No. Do we play our fall balls? Yes. How many different fields do you have to hit to? Left, center, and right. What field do we have to hit to? Center field. If we go off left and right, we pay a penalty. So you had a wide field, we had a small field. We had a fairway which is only 40 yards wide. So the accuracy of compressing the ball and hitting it square toward your target was pretty difficult because it would be like hitting a home run with a baseball to center field all the time. Right to center field, not left or right. But what's the furthest part of a baseball diamond? Center field. 420 yards. Left and right are shorter. So when I said, Ted, we play 18 holes with 14 clubs. You got one bat to hit a baseball. And most of your diamonds are pretty much the same. They all look pretty much the same. Golf courses are all different. And you're playing 18 holes with 14 clubs. Baseball, you play one bat and one ball, one glove. So there's a difference there. Your club selection becomes critical, and distance and direction are more difficult to control. And he said, but the baseball is moving 100 miles an hour when you throw it. I said, but if you already know the pitch, and you get ready mentally to know it's going to be a fastball, you're ready to swing the bat properly. But if he throws you a slider or a curveball, then the rotation of the ball and the speed of the ball are different, and the way it curves is harder to find it. So we got through the debate, and he said, I yield. Okay? So that debate was won because I had more answers than he did. So your father played baseball in high school, but I knew that wasn't my spot. Wasn't strong enough, big enough, didn't have the strength and the leverage. But I met a famous baseball player when I was in high school. And I know a lot of people, when they hear this, Bruce, aren't going to believe it. His name was Tris Speaker. Now, if you Google Tris Speaker, he was very famous back in the 40s. And then I met another great player before I met Williams and Mantle and all these other guys, which I had became their teacher to some degree. And the next player I met was Joe Curlman for the Boston Red Sox. Ted Williams played for the Red Sox. And that was Boston near Northampton, where I went to school. So it's interesting that you brought that subject up. But you notice I diversified from Tommy Johns to Ted Williams
Good
to
God.
all these different athletes. And golf is a game where, if I can close by saying this, golf is a game that defies you to master it and wants you to be a slave to it. And most golfers are a slave to it. Why? Because they can't play very well.
Mm-hmm.
And they get frustrated and mad. Well, it's like the home run hitter that strikes out a lot. And what players strike out the most? Home run hitters. Because they're going for the fences and they're trying to accelerate the bat. So, harder to make contact consistently. Same thing in golf. The faster you swing the club, and you can imagine the diameter of this baseball circumference, which is, if this is the equator, you got to strike just below the equator, which is the center. In golf, you don't have that much room because it's so small, and if you don't contact the ball exactly from the equator going down, if you're above it or too far below it, you have what we call missed the sweet spot. And I said I'd close by telling you this, but here I am still talking. So I always liked the story about the sweet spot when one of my students hits it and he says, "Oh, I just hit it on the sweet spot." I said, "How'd you know that?" "It felt better, it sounded better, it went further." I said, "Well, can you do that again?" And he swings and he doesn't make good contact. And I said, "Well, now you understand the sour spot versus the sweet spot." And most golfers hit the ball with a sour spot, which is poor contact, no square contact, toe or heel, and the ball goes offline. So welcome to baseball, and welcome to golf, and welcome to Bob Toski.
So back to Tommy Johns real quick. I know it's been a long time, but when you talked to him, did he attribute anything in particular to his recovery from the shoulder injury?
You know, we never talked about how it happened. He just said, "I threw my arm out, and I couldn't pitch and I had to get surgery." And
So he did have I'm not really familiar with the situation. He
when
had
you're
a
getting
successful recovery.
He went to this famous surgeon I think in Alabama that was noted for that type of surgery. And that's something. But I think Tommy Johns was the first one to have this type of surgery.
Okay. Was he a successful pitcher after
He was
the surgery?
Successful, yes.
Yeah. So did he
There are
mention?
players that, but it took a long time to recover.
Yeah.
Your father had the adhesive capsulitis in his left shoulder, and I couldn't lift my arm 2 inches above my knee. And it took me 6 months to recover with Dana Van Pelt, which was a great rehabilitator here in Boca Raton. And I had more pain in that shoulder, and I couldn't believe how long I had to. He said, "You've got to spend 6 months to recover fully to get the shoulder back 100%.
Yeah.
And he said a lot of my students quit after 3 months, figuring that they're cured, and they never did get to 100%. And you're back to 100% almost in your left shoulder because you paid the price. You let me work with you 6 months. So there's a price for everything.
Of course, many years ago, Ben Hogan had the terrifically